Imagine one day not being able to walk, in a world where you cannot feel your legs. That is what happens to millions of people with botulism, who suffer every single day.
Botulism is not a common disease, but when it occurs, it causes rapid, life-threatening paralysis. It is produced by a neurotoxin produced by the bacteria, the type of pathogen, Clostridium botulinum. Unlike most infections, botulism isn't spread like person to person like it would be like with the coronavirus, but instead is transmitted through environmental exposure to the toxin itself.
Four major routes of transmission. The first is foodborne botulism, when people consume food contaminated with the preformed toxin, most commonly from improperly canned or preserved low-acid foods like home-canned vegetables, fermented seafood, or unpasteurized products. The second is wound botulism, which occurs when spores from the bacteria enter a deep wound, often related to traumatic injuries or intravenous drug use, and release a toxin directly into the bloodstream.
The third form is infant botulism. Infants under 1 year can ingest spores, commonly from dust or honey. Their immature intestines allow the spores to germinate and produce toxin in the gut. Lastly, iatrogenic botulism can occur from an overdose or misuse of botulinum toxin in medical or cosmetic procedures, though this is rare.
Risk factors vary depending on the form. For foodborne botulism, the food infection, poor food preservation is key. For infants, age is a critical factor, especially if they are under 6 months old. In wound cases, the highest risk group includes individuals using injectable drugs like heroin. There's no strong evidence of how gender can affect, though some studies show that there's more botulism in men and they can cause mortality.
Once the toxin enters the body, it targets the neuromuscular junction. It binds to nerve terminals and prevents the release of acetylcholine, the chemical needed to contract muscles. This results in flaccid paralysis, starting in the face and moving down. Eventually, respiratory muscles can be affected, requiring medical ventilation.
Structurally, the muscles and bones are unarmed, but functionally, the musculoskeletal system is disconnected. With prolonged immobility, muscle wasting of bones loss can occur. Meanwhile, the immune system struggles to respond. Because the toxin is so potent, even minute amounts can act before the adaptive immune system has to detect and mount a response. Natural immunity rarely develops.
Diagnosis is clinical, supported by the lab detection of botulism toxin in serum, stool, or food, in just the overall environment. However, other tests as in electromyography can help identify the characteristic nerve conduction block that enables the musculoskeletal system.
Treatment begins with antitoxin, which stops the progression but doesn't reverse the paralysis. Recovery depends on the body regenerating nerve endings, which may take weeks to months. In infants, a specialized immune globulin is used. Supportive care, especially respiratory support, is often life-saving.
Botulism is a medical emergency, but it is also preventable. Safe food preservation, wound care, and public awareness remain the most effective tools to reduce risk.
Botulism is one of the most dangerous diseases, although rare. That's why here at 3G BioMotion, we have analyzed certain graphs to see how can we create an adaptive solution to botulism. So in the first graph we analyzed, we can see how the number of botulism cases has changed over the years. In the x-axis, the independent variable, we have time from 2007 to 2020. And on the y-axis, we see the number of botulism cases per 100,000 people. That's the dependent variable. The solid blue line shows the actual number of botulism cases recorded each year, and the dotted line shows the overall trend, which helps us see whether the disease is becoming more or less common over time. What we notice is that the incidence of botulism has been slowly decreasing. This is likely thanks to advances in medicine, better hygiene practices, and the way countries are adapting to their healthcare systems. Between 2007 and 2009, there were high peaks, with a maximum of 0.18 cases per 100,000 people. One of the lowest points happened in 2017, which supports the idea that the disease is becoming less and less frequent. Still, there are some ups and downs in the graphs. This may be caused by unexpected food outbreaks or just environmental conditions that are overall hard to control.
Now, let's move on to the second graph. This one shows a world map with countries shaded in different colors. The darker the color, the more botulism cases that country has had. Here, the independent variable is the country, since each one has different health systems, hygiene conditions, and environments. The dependent variable is how many cases of botulism were reported. We also see letters that tells us the type of botulism found in each place. I is infant botulism, F is foodborne, W is wound botulism, N is non-clinical or environmental, and U means the origin is unknown. North America shows all types of botulism, meaning the population is exposed to different sources, clinical and environmental. In Western Europe, there's a clear presence of infant, foodborne, and wound-related cases. This tells us that there's a variety of cases, but also that these countries are monitoring them. Italy and Greece mostly show foodborne and non-clinical botulism, which may mean they have strong enough healthcare systems to manage these clinical types. In South America, there's a mix of all types, which is common for the region. In Africa, we can see the link between botulism types and socioeconomic conditions. Most of the countries with available data show foodborne and wound-related botulism, often due to environmental and economic challenges. In Asia, we find all types, especially infant botulism. This suggests that contaminated food is still a big issue around the world.
Now, the third graph shows how much money is being invested to fight botulism. On the x-axis, we see the years, including a forecast for 2031. On the y-axis, we see the market value in billions of dollars. The bars show how much each continent is expected to invest in treatment and prevention. What we see is a clear increase over time. The global market for botulism-related treatment is growing, and by 2031, it's expected to reach around $1.69 billion. North America leads the market, likely because of its strong health infrastructure and scientific development. Europe and Asia are also making big investments, with Asia growing rapidly due to its large population and improvements in health systems. South America and Africa are increasing their investments too, though more slowly, probably because of more limited access to advanced medical technology. All of this shows how important it is to invest in public health and research, especially for rare but dangerous diseases like botulism.
So, who is the most vulnerable to this disease? Although we already posed a question on the first part of the documentary, we are here to find out a more general conclusion, taking into account of the data. So mainly, infants under 1 year old are the most vulnerable, since their digestive systems are not fully developed and allow the bacteria Clostridium botulinum spores to grow. Also at risk are people with unclean wounds and those who eat poorly preserved food, like with open cans and humidity. The bacteria itself lives in soil, dust, and water, and it thrives in places without oxygen, like in properly canned food or hot storage conditions. Even though botulism is rare, it's extremely dangerous because its toxin is one of the most powerful we have ever known. Most cases are related to poor hygiene or food safety. That's why education, proper sanitation, and access to antitoxins are essential to reduce death rates and stop the disease from spreading. However, we argue that mostly adolescents should be the ones worrying about botulism, since they're the ones getting an education. But how can we solve the problem? So here at 3J BioMotion, our mission is to find real, practical solutions for patients affected by botulism. That's why we have developed an innovative limb prosthetic, like from down the knee, that could revolutionize the way amputees can walk again.
So when botulism damages a limb, the remaining muscles of the leg or the arm, but in this case the leg, still hold great potential. Our prototype takes advantage of the upper leg muscles, which remain connected to the musculoskeletal system, to generate movement. The goal is to restore basic mobility and improve quality life, especially for low-income patients who need an affordable solution for their current condition.
Our prosthetic leg is about 50 centimeters tall, based on real human measurements. The main structure is made of two 47 centimeter PVAC tubes, or a little bit less, of 2 inches in diameter. These tubes are light but strong enough to support body weight. At the base, we placed an insole, which goes inside a shoe, which may be connected to any type of shoe. When it's connected, we can also fill it with paper stuffing to keep the PVC stable inside. So there's the insole, the PVC tubes, and the insole just goes in any shoe. A piece of cardboard connects the tubes and stabilizes them. To attach the prosthetic to the limb, we use nylon and lots of tape. A book is also used to add support and balance where the leg meets the body. We also analyze the forces acting on the prosthetic to make sure it supports a real person's weight. Here, we calculated normal force, which is 420.06 newtons, gravitational force, which is negative 420.06 newtons, applied force from the upper muscles, which are 455.07 newtons, and the friction force, which is the resistance force, which is negative 455.07 newtons. These calculations helped us verify that materials could handle the pressure of walking without bending or breaking, and it also just helps us analyze the whole prosthetic itself.
After measuring and cutting the PVC tubes, we connected them using the cardboard and fixed them into the shoe with the stuffing. This will generate a similarity to the real-life ankle, since it's going to provide great stability for the prosthetics. Also, the nylon that we used was tied carefully around the upper part of the prosthetics to secure it to the thigh or the upper limb muscles. All elements were adjusted to ensure balance and alignment, allowing the user to stand and walk.
Before we tested the prosthetic, one of our professors gave us valuable advice. We need to check if the stuffing inside the shoe would actually resist weight. So we tried different types of materials and ensured that the final wall kept the tubes firmly in place during movement. Another professor reminded us that the real walking requires toe and heel motion, and that our design was more like a peg leg. We considered adding a round flexible joint to allow the toes to move. However, we found that this could cause instability and dangerous falls, so we kept our original design focused on balance and safety.
So the step-by-step for our prosthetics was first we glued the PVC tubes into a piece of cardboard, and then we attached the cardboard into a book to give it structure and support. Next, we glued the book to a comfortable base for the knee. And finally, we made several adjustments to improve balance, height, and comfort for the user. For example, in the case of height, we needed to cut the PVC tubes a little bit shorter as they were too long for the patient.
Once the prototype was ready and adjusted, we tested it in a real-life situation. One of our team members walked 10 meters in the length of a basketball court. The prosthetic, however, didn't support the weight correctly and didn't allow smooth, simple motion. This was because although it was possible to do force with the upper muscles, the prosthetic wasn't balanced at all and it would just fall off. It was also just us carrying and dragging the prosthetics through the court, since it just had difficulty to attach to the part where the PVC tubes were connecting to the knee. The PVC tubes were tight at the shoe, but maybe the recommendation of teacher 2 could have helped in the movement. To solve this issue, as a company, we proposed the idea of adding a spring-loaded mechanism under the heel of the prosthetic. It wouldn't be as big and stable as the rounded figure we suggested, but it will also accomplish the task. It will allow the foot to push off the ground more naturally and imitate the motion of a real foot when walking. As a group, we understand that our prosthetic isn't always the best, so we also explored other possible designs to improve mobility for our patient with botulism. First, we thought about exoskeletons, which are wearable machines that help the legs move. They're more expensive than mostly used in hospitals or research, but in the future they could be more common. They support walking using motors or springs. And if the leg doesn't need to be amputated, we could also use muscle stimulation therapy, which is using basically electric pulses to reactivate damaged muscles. It doesn't replace a leg, but it can help muscles get stronger.
This prosthetic is just a step, but it also shows that low-cost, life-changing solutions are possible. We believe that with further improvements, more people affected by diseases like botulism can regain their independence. At 3D BioMotion, we're not just building prosthetics, we're building futures.